right, let's talk about your next system design interview. There's a concept that is almost guaranteed to come up, and getting it right is, well, it's the difference between a system that scales beautifully and one that's a total disaster. We're talking about distributed locks. Let's make sure you absolutely nail it.
Okay, picture this. A user hits the buy button. Your system gets to work processing the payment. A moment later, their phone buzzes, and then it buzzes again. They've been charged twice. Now, this isn't just some minor bug. This is a huge deal. It breaks user trust, and it costs real money. So what on earth went wrong?
The culprit, my friends, is a classic race condition. What happened was two different servers grabbed the very same payment request at the exact same millisecond. They both looked at the status, both saw pending, and so they both charged the card. This is the precise high-stakes problem that a distributed lock is built to solve.
You know, on a single computer, this is actually pretty easy to fix. You just use a simple lock or a mutex to make sure only one thread can touch the payment at a time. But in a distributed system, with servers all over the world, a lock in one server's memory is totally invisible to another. We need a lock that works across the entire network.
And that's, right there, is where a distributed lock comes into play. You can think of it like a global talking stick. Only the server that is currently holding that stick is allowed to access that shared resource, in our case, the payment record. It is the fundamental tool for making sure our servers play nicely together.
The basic idea is really simple. Server A goes to the locking service and asks, hey, can I have the lock for payment 123? If it's free, the service says, yep, it's all yours. Server A does its thing, processes the payment, and then tells the service, okay, I'm done, releasing the lock so another server can have a turn.
Now, not all locks are created equal. A really solid production-ready distributed lock needs to have three key properties. First, mutual exclusion. That's the whole point, right? Only one server can hold the lock at a time. Second, it has to be deadlock-free, meaning a crash server can't hold the lock hostage forever. And third, it's got to be fault-tolerant, so the lock service itself can't be a single point of failure.
So how do we actually build one of these things? Let's start with probably the most common way you'll see this done, using Redis. It's really the go-to choice when you need a fast, pretty simple distributed lock.
The magic behind a Redis lock is this one little command, SETNX. That NX literally stands for set if not exists. When a server runs this, Redis does an atomic check. If the lock key isn't there, it sets it, and boom, the server has the lock. But just as important is that PX 5000 part. That sets a 5-second timeout. This is your safety net.
And let me be perfectly clear about this. That timeout, it is not optional. It is your number one, absolute best defense against deadlocks. If a server grabs a lock and then just crashes, that timeout is the only thing in the world that prevents that lock from being stuck forever. Let's just walk through this. So at time 0, server A gets the lock with a 5-second timeout. 2 seconds in, the server crashes without releasing the lock. Oh no, disaster, right? Nope, because at the 5-second mark, Redis automatically says, time's up, and deletes the key. So at second 6, server B can come along, grab the now available lock, and the system just keeps on chugging. That is the power of a timeout.
So what's the catch? Well, here are the trade-offs. The big pro, Redis is blazing fast and super simple to set up for this. The big con, a single Redis instance is a single point of failure. If that one Redis server goes down, your entire locking system goes down with it.
Now, to get around that single point of failure, the Redlock algorithm was developed. The idea is, instead of using just one Redis server, you use several independent ones, let's say 5. To get the lock, you have to successfully acquire it from a majority of them. So in this case, at least 3. This gives you that fault tolerance we were talking about.
But hey, Redis isn't the only game in town. For things that are super critical, like financial transactions, you might need even stronger guarantees of consistency, even if it costs you a little bit of speed. And this brings us to the heavy hitters, using your database or a dedicated service like ZooKeeper. This table really breaks it all down. You go with Redis when speed is king. You can use your database, often with a select for update query when you want strong consistency right next to your data. But just be aware, that can become a performance bottleneck. And you reach for a beast like ZooKeeper when you need ironclad, bulletproof reliability for critical tasks, and you're willing to handle its complexity. But picking the right tool is only half the job. A really senior engineer is always thinking about what could go wrong.
Because, in a distributed system, if something can go wrong, believe me, it will go wrong. We've talked a lot about deadlocks, which timeouts are great for. But then you've got weird stuff like split brain, where a network hiccup might trick two servers into thinking that they both have the lock. And then there's clock drift. If the clocks on your servers aren't perfectly in sync, your timeouts become unreliable, causing locks to expire too early or way too late. Okay, so where does all this theory actually show up in the real world? Well, the truth is, these locks are running silently behind the scenes in systems you probably use every single day. We started this whole thing with payment processing, right? To stop those double charges. They're also essential for leader election, making sure only one server is the boss. In job scheduling, they make sure a critical task only runs once. And in e-commerce, they're the only thing stopping you from selling the last item in stock to two different people at the same time. All right, it's crunch time. You're at the whiteboard, the interviewer is watching. How do you pull all of this together into a perfect answer that shows you really, truly get the trade-offs involved?
You always want to start by stating the core principle. This shows you understand the why behind the what. You'd say, I'd use a distributed lock here to prevent race conditions and ensure we have strong data consistency across our services. Next, you show that you understand the trade-offs. This is what signals real-world experience. You could say something like, for cases where performance is the top priority, I'd probably start with a Redis-based lock using SETNX with a timeout. But for more mission-critical systems that absolutely require strong consistency, I'd lean towards a more robust solution like ZooKeeper. That's the kind of nuanced answer they love to hear. And finally, you have to mention the critical operational detail. You can add, and of course, a critical part of any implementation would be carefully managing lock expiry to prevent deadlocks if a client fails. That right there, that's the mark of a senior engineer who thinks about resilience.
So, the main takeaway is really simple. Whenever you have multiple servers all trying to mess with the same resource, you need to make them take turns in a safe, orderly way. Distributed locks are basically the traffic cops of your distributed system. So I'll leave you with this final thought. You solve the double payment problem, fantastic. But in system design, every single solution introduces a new set of problems. By adding a locking service, you've just added a new dependency, a new potential point of failure, and more network latency. So the real question is never just, is the problem solved, but rather, have I chosen the right set of trade-offs for this specific system?